Welcome, everyone, to the Clocking Out podcast. It's a show about people who share their own personal journey that include making bold choices to clock out of situations, to follow their dreams of career fulfillment, and to live their best, most authentic lives. I am your host, Raymond Lee, and this podcast could not be possible without the support of Career Minds. Today, I'm incredibly excited to welcome Kate Lingoni. One of the things that I am most excited about Kate is that she's a native New Orleanian like myself. So we have a lot in common, a lot to talk about, where we grew up to what we did as kids. Kate is an entrepreneur. She's an actor, a mom, and a business owner with a diverse background in science, the arts, and business consulting. Kate's personal awakening and ever-evolving career journey led her to a personal mission to live without regret and to help as many people as she can along the way. So in this episode, we kick off with how we got introduced to one another, to diving right into such a real conversation about life, living in New Orleans, and the pursuit of happiness. So without further ado, please enjoy Kate Lingoni and her clocking out story. Kate, welcome to the podcast. It's nice to see you.
Good morning. Good to see you too.
Kate, I am so excited about our conversation today. You and I connected, I guess it's been a couple of months now. My cousin Tara reached out to me and she said, "Oh my gosh, I need to introduce you to someone who could potentially be a guest on your podcast." And I said, okay. And you and I have connected now. We had a conversation and I'm just really excited about your journey and all the things that you've done up until this point. It's really interesting how your career started and what you're doing today. So I'm super excited to dig in.
Okay, great. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, of course. It's interesting because you're from New Orleans and that's my hometown. You're my first guest that I've had who's from New Orleans. That's super cool. But what I like to do is start from the beginning, share with our listeners where you're from, where'd you grow up, maybe a little bit about your parents, and we'll go from there.
Okay, cool. So like you said, I'm from New Orleans. I grew up in Metairie. If you're a New Orleans person, I went to Chapelle. I have a twin sister, Marissa, and we pretty much grew up together in the neighborhoods of outskirts of Old Metairie, I guess you could say, kind of over by Rummel. So back in the day, not like kids now, we spent a lot of time outdoors, riding bikes and roaming around with our friends and getting into trouble. We both went to LSU after we graduated high school with pretty much our entire friend group, because that's what people in New Orleans do.
I'm curious, what did your parents do for a living?
So my mom was a stay-at-home mom starting when we were in high school. Before that, she worked at like Progressive Insurance as an adjuster.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually the first person in my mom's side of the family to graduate from college. My dad was a petroleum engineer, so he had a very high stress job, and thankfully he's retired now and is way more chill. But yeah, so kind of had the math and science, like the STEM kind of leanings from the beginning, just because he was an engineer. But I pretty much, since I was a kid, I've always found science to be really cool. And I still love science, even though I don't do it anymore.
Mm. So when you were a kid, you were a twin. And I wonder, like, what did you want to be when you grew up at a young age? Did your dad's career have an influence on that? What did you want to be?
So when I was really young, I wanted to be a cop or be in the military, which there's a deeper reason behind that. I had kind of a rough childhood. My biological father and his mother started like a 10-year custody battle with my parents, and there was a lot of drama that went along with that, and I felt very powerless at the time. So I kind of always, my career goals were oriented around having power and being in positions of authority.
Mm,
Um, so eventually I kind of grew from that into um, catching bad guys, you know? So that was kind of the segue into forensics. Um, just kind of as a natural interest, I guess, with, you know, how I always thought science was cool. And it was more problem solving and like figuring shit out than just
mhm.
following orders, you know?
How old were you then? How old were you?
Uh, I don't know, maybe around 10.
Mm. So did your parents separate and your mom got remarried?
So my mom and my biological father were never married. They were
Mm,
dating, and you know, my mom had always been told that she couldn't get pregnant, and then she got pregnant on accident with twins, so it was like, hello.
mm,
Um, but yeah, my biological father wasn't ready to be a dad, I guess. So he kind of wasn't around for the first couple of years, but his family was very supportive. Like his sisters would bring my mom diapers or food and stuff like that, because she
mm,
was a single mom of twins. And I mean, that sounds terrible. But yeah, she married my stepdad, I think when we were about 3 or 4, and they're still married. So that's great.
mm. Yeah, so it sounds like you had at 3 and 4, you started to form some stability in the family. And so that's so interesting that you had this desire to want to be in a position of authority based on that. And so, how long did that sort of play out until you realized that you were not interested in being a cop anymore, but you sort of got into something else?
Um, I'm not 100% sure because I don't have strong memories of most of my childhood, but
Mhm.
probably somewhere between that age and high school. Like, you know, you do a lot of like career finding stuff and researching things in high school to prepare you for college. And I think, um, you know, my mom didn't want me to join the military. So it was like looking at alternatives and things that I already found interesting, you know, and I think looking at being a cop kind of uh, forensics is pretty tangential to that field of work, you know. So I think it was kind of just a
Mm.
natural inclination.
So you enrolled in LSU and you decided that you were going to get a degree in science and pursue this forensic. Is that what you ended up getting a degree in?
I did get my undergrad in biology, but you know, after doing the research and like looking at the types of careers that those people have, I ended up moving away from that just because I already have clinical anxiety and depression, you know, and um, even just being casually interested in that field of study is
Mhm.
morbid and depressing, and like you see the worst of humanity. Um, so I kind of made an executive decision that that was not going to um, lead to me being happy with life in general. So I kind of, you know, was looking for alternatives to do with a biology degree, and there's a lot. But since I didn't want to go into the medical field, it was like, okay, what else am I interested in?
Mhm.
And I minored in oceanography, and my concentration was in marine science. But beyond, you know, academia and like research positions, there really aren't a lot of well-paying um, careers in that field. Like it's mostly a research field. Um, so I had also looked at environmental science because, you know, there's like entire firms and agencies that do that, you know, phase one and phase two and phase three and, you know, remediation and all that stuff. So
Mhm.
it's more of a professional career, I guess.
Mm.
Um, and I was leaning towards that. At least I wanted to try it and like get some experience and see if I did in fact enjoy it. But when I graduated, it was during the other recession in 2008. So no one was hiring and I couldn't get a job for like 2 years.
So, Kate, I wanted to go back and make an observation about just sort of how you were navigating your degree because I think a lot of people relate to you start a degree thinking you're going to do one thing and then you pivot, even within college, and decide you're going to do something else. And I just think about myself. I had a degree in psychology, and initially I was thinking about wanting to be a psychologist or psychiatrist. And I did a internship in a psychiatric unit and realized I do not want to be in this environment. And so I ended up going and getting my master's in IO psychology and ended up in business with a psychology degree. And it wasn't until halfway through college I realized I didn't want anything to do with clinical. And so totally relate to that journey that you took. So tell me about what did you end up graduating with, and then what was your first job?
So I did graduate in biology with a minor in oceanography and a concentration in marine science.
Mm,
And that was really just because, like, those last couple of credits, you just need to finish them. You just need to pick something. So I
mm,
was like, okay, well, I'm going to do something that I actually find interesting. And then
mm.
it ended up being enough to get, a minor and a concentration. Um, my first job out of college, I think we literally moved to Dallas like right after I graduated. So I think it was like I was applying to jobs at all these different places and, not hearing back and getting rejected. And because I didn't have um, that kind of professional experience, even though I had worked in different labs and different like science
Mm,
verticals, I guess you could say,
mhm,
um, throughout college. Like I'd always been a student worker working in different labs and like getting experience and trying different types of science. Like I
mhm,
worked in aquaculture and coastal plant ecology and plankton ecology and a couple other things like just figuring it out. So I think my first job out of college might have been Michael's the craft store because I couldn't find anything and I needed to make some money.
mm,
And I liked crafting at the time. So it was like, okay.
mm. Yeah, that's it's so interesting. I when I graduated with my psychology degree, I couldn't find a job because I didn't have any experience. And being from New Orleans, I ended up working the front desk at Le Pavillon Hotel. It's so interesting how you spend all of this time getting a degree, you graduate, you even have internships and experience that you know make you qualified to do something, but then you ultimately it's a struggle to find a job, and so you end up in some job that isn't necessarily a means to an end. But I would imagine working at Michael's it led to something.
Um, I mean, it definitely helped me make some friends while we were there,
Mm-hmm.
but I ended up coming back to Baton Rouge. A friend of mine that I had known since undergrad uh, was working for a plankton ecologist in the oceanography department, and they had an opening for a research associate. And he called me and had talked me up to his boss already, and I thought about it and for 5 minutes and was like, hell yeah, okay. So I moved back to Baton Rouge, and my boyfriend at the time, now my ex-husband, stayed in Dallas because he had a job there.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back to LSU as a research associate and was working, in coastal Louisiana doing sampling and sample processing and lab work up until the Deepwater Horizon. And then our group worked as consultants basically for NOAA. Um, the, what is it, National Ocean and Atmospheric Association on their natural resource damage assessment, basically going out to sea on different vessels after the oil spill to do oil droplet characterization and try to figure out if and how the oil spill and, controlled burns and coagulants and all these different things affected the water column. So we were in the water column group looking at phytoplankton and zooplankton and stuff like that. So we did that for about 3 years, basically up until the BP civil case was concluded. And that was like one of the coolest things I've ever done. Like it was a terrible tragedy that it happened, but actually being out there and like seeing the oil on the water and like watching the controlled burns and we were doing like deeper sea sampling, so I was seeing organisms that I'd only seen in textbooks, like an anglerfish or red octopuses or red shrimp, and things with photophores, and I don't know, it was just really cool. And met a lot of people doing that too, because there were other universities involved in all of our stints at sea and other consultants. So really met a lot of people and learned about the different areas of research around that. And I pretty much did that until we moved to Atlanta, which over the period of time that I was working on the Deepwater Horizon, my boyfriend moved back to Baton Rouge and started his master's degree at LSU. So when he graduated, we moved to Atlanta because he got a job. And then I was working remotely for about a year until I got pregnant. And then I did the stay-at-home mom thing for like 2 years.
So you worked on that project for a number of years. And I guess one of the questions I was just thinking about is, it seems so technical. Like, how did you get the experience? Were you just sort of like a sponge, and no pun intended, but like did you just were you just open to wanting to learn? Did you have any insecurities about being out there and not really knowing what to expect? Or like, that just for me seems so intimidating to like go out in this sort of crisis. Like, this is a national crisis that's happening, and then like you're in the midst of it, and it sounds like you are new in your career. And I wonder, where did the confidence come from to want to be able to learn about something that's completely new?
Well, to be honest, I kind of thrive in environments like that. And it's not the first time I've had to learn something that was completely new to me.
Hmm.
Like when I took that research associate position, like yes, I had a biology undergrad and an oceanography minor and a marine science concentration, but that didn't teach me how to identify plankton, or use sampling tools off of a boat, or any of those things. So it's a very hands-on learning kind of opportunity, and you kind of just have to be open. Like it's exciting more than anything,
Mm-hmm.
because you're constantly being exposed to new methods, and some of the people who are out there are really innovating in their field. So you're seeing things that other people don't get to see yet, like a video plankton recorder that gets towed through the water and basically takes a video of the water column like this, and then it uses software to like extrapolate out all the images so you can identify things and then like back calculate concentration of that particular organism based on the volume of water that it scanned. So just like really cool shit. And it was hard not to be excited, like I know it was a very, like you said, it was a national tragedy. But being in the middle of it was very interesting and very stimulating, like it was highly educational. And it was kind of you know, learn as you go. I had a great boss who was very empathetic, very patient, and also excited. She loved her work and she was happy to teach other people. And working under someone like that is very compelling.
Hmm.
You kind of just grow into your role. And yeah, I loved being out at sea. Like it was, a little intimidating, but I've always loved boats and like being on the ocean. My dad had a sailboat when I was a kid growing up. Um, and it just, it was just very exciting and
Hmm.
fun.
How long did you do that for? How long was the project? How long was the job?
Um, I want to say 5 years
Hmm.
or about.
Okay, so you made a comment earlier that I want to go back to. You said that you got pregnant and you did the stay-at-home mom thing. And it's just interesting the way you said that because you're just describing this amazing opportunity, this job, and you decided to be a stay-at-home mom for a few years. And I just wonder, you said that is almost matter of fact versus like it was a well thought out sort of decision, and knowing how much excitement you had from the job that you were in this big project. um, I just wonder why you made that decision.
So that's a complicated question.
Is it?
um,
I don't mean to be complicated. It's more out of curiosity than anything.
no, it's okay. So growing up, like I was never one of those people who was like, I want to get married and have babies. Like that was not me. I wanted to be a professional. Like I wanted to have a career. I wanted to travel the world.
Hmm.
Um, and then I got my first boyfriend, and then everything kind of changed. And then it was like, oh, okay, so this is what people mean. So in my relationship at the time when I was working as a research associate, we got married during the Deepwater Horizon thing.
Hmm.
Um, and we had this kind of verbal agreement that when he got his first like big salary, like real job, um, I would get off of birth control and we would start trying. And I thought, because I've been on birth control my entire life since high school, I thought it would take a while, but it did not. So at the time when I got pregnant, I was working remotely for LSU, but doing all of the less fun parts of that job, so
Mm.
it was like entirely computer based work and identifying plankton on a computer screen. It was very tedious, necessary to the analysis, but not fun. So I was kind of getting burnt out on that aspect of it anyway. And then when I got pregnant, our grant funding was kind of running out. Like our project was pretty much drawing to a close after the civil court case had ended. So it felt like a good time to leave, to be honest. And then at the time, let's see, when was that? Yeah, we were still in Atlanta when I was pregnant. Um, like I'm a researcher at heart. I like to gather information and consolidate ideas to like fully understand something before I make a decision. And I had read a lot about how important the first 2 years of a baby's life is to their development. So I kind of just made the decision that I wanted to stay home for the first 2 years to make sure that he had the level of care and attention that I felt like he deserved.
Hmm.
Um, so that was kind of my pivot into the stay at home mom thing. But do not be fooled. I had a huge identity crisis from leaving science and becoming a stay at home mom because as I said, like I was not one of those people where that was my dream, so I definitely felt like this was a pause in my career. Um, Kind of a necessary sacrifice, I guess, if you will, in order to give my son, the best baseline for his development.
Hmm.
Um, I, I had this kind of mental breakdown where I was trying to show up the way that I knew my son needed, but I very much struggled with my anxiety and like kind of this loss of self and, what was I going to do after this? And um, struggling with like meaning and purpose, because I had tied a lot of my identity to my job
Mm.
and I don't know, career. Like I'd always been very career oriented, so that was important to me. So then, even though it was my choice to give it up, once I didn't have it, I was kind of lost.
Mm.
Um, so that whole time period, like I was not one of those people who just like loved having a baby. Like that part was really, really hard for me. And I was unmedicated at that time. I got on Zoloft after probably the year after I had my son, and that helped a lot because I before that point I had had undiagnosed anxiety and depression.
Mm.
Um, but once I got on that, that really helped, and reconnected with myself, and it really was the beginning of my kind of soul journey, like really figuring out myself and finding out what I wanted and who I was as a person. Like I didn't really like the person that I was when I had my son, and I kind of just woke up one day and was like, like I don't want to be this way for him. I want to be better. I want to grow as a person. Like I don't want to raise him the way my parents raised me. Not to shit on my parents or anything, but they did the best they could with what they had, and that's what I was trying to do. I had
Mm.
a little bit more self knowledge, a little bit more resources, just because of the internet and social media and access to tools and therapy and all the things. So that was kind of the beginning of like my personal journey of becoming myself, because I had spent a lot of time as a young adult doing what I thought I was supposed to do and being who I thought people wanted me to be. And I had never really spent enough time alone to figure out what I actually wanted and who I really was. Um, so yeah, that was kind of the catalyst for me starting to work on myself and like grow as a person.
Mm. Wow, I appreciate you sharing that. I can only imagine how life happens, and you wake up one morning and you have this baby, and you had to make some decisions, and I can only imagine how tough it was, sort of going through that process. But you're figuring things out, and I can only imagine that as you look back, um, you don't have any regrets, obviously, but the foundation of that being that stay-at-home mom and spending time with your son probably gave you a lot of perspective of what's important, and really sort of played into it's a tough road, a tough journey, but the things that are tough just make you stronger as a human, and you obviously come out on the other end. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of people, when you're in your career, life happens, unexpectedly, and you find yourself in situations that, take you at a different place in terms of where you are, sort of mentally, and you have to figure things out. Life is hard. And at a young age, you were delivered, no pun intended, a newborn who needed your attention, and you did that for 2 years. And kudos to you for, leaning into that, and wanting to be there for him for the first 2 years of his life. And I'm sure you look back and you're like, that was the best freaking decision I think I've ever made, because it shaped your son to be the person he is. And you compare that to what you dealt with, right? Like as an infant, and what you had to deal with. You made the decision that I'm giving my son a different path that I had. And along the way, I'm going to figure my shit out, and have to, like, you know, take that dose of reality and turn it into something that's meaningful. And so I just think it's incredibly inspiring, Kate. I love it.
Well, thank you. I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely, looking back, have a lot of compassion for myself back then. You know, when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to see anything else. It's
Mm,
like having blinders on, or being in a rain cloud. Um, it definitely, like, having my son really shaped who I am now in
mm,
the best way possible, and while it was hard and at times I was miserable, I can see from the person he is now, now he's 9. Like, he has a level of emotional intelligence that most kids his age, some adults, don't even have. He's very articulate. He reads really well. He's great at math. Like, so I feel validated in that time, in that one-on-one time where, I was meeting him at his level and meeting him with his needs, and
mm,
kind of doing the Montessori thing, like letting the child lead and stuff like that. It definitely was worth that time invested, and it did give me a lot of space to do some personal analysis, and some introspection. And, I wouldn't be where I'm at if I hadn't gone through that whole
mm,
growth period. And that was
yeah.
only the beginning.
Mm. So what was next?
So when my son was about 2, my husband got a job in Springfield, Illinois. So we relocated again. And I got our son into daycare and got a part time job as a program coordinator for a nonprofit in Springfield. And once I put my son into daycare, I had suddenly all of this time um, to try to figure out what I wanted to do next. Part of that was doing things that made me really uncomfortable. And one of those things, I got into acting. I started driving to St. Louis, which is about 2 hours away, every week for acting class for about 4 hours. And then I would drive back after class. Um, and that was more about me dealing with my emotions and, like, coming out of my depression and just this, like, mind fuck that I had found myself in, where I felt kind of numb to the
Mm,
world. Like, I had been in mommy mode for like so long that interacting with other adults was like not a thing, and going along with that, figuring out who I was as a person, kind of thing. Like, I
mm,
needed to learn how to feel again, and part of that was exposing myself and pretending to feel in order to remember how to feel. I don't
mm,
know if that makes any sense to anyone else, but I I was very against therapy at the time. As a kid, I had had a lot of like court mandated therapy, and I hated those therapists. So now I see a therapist, but back at that time, I was very like anti therapy.
mhm,
Um, so starting to go to acting classes and like doing this really uncomfortable thing that was like so far out of my comfort zone, and kind of getting out of my shell was like the first really, well, beyond being a mom, the first like hard thing that I voluntarily chose for myself, because I kind of have this mentality of um, comfort is where growth goes to die.
right.
So I was taking classes in St. Louis while I was working at this part-time job. Um, so I was getting exposed to different kind of types of entrepreneurship. So I was meeting all of these business owners in various industries through the entrepreneurship program. And then I was also learning how to build myself as a brand through acting. And I got into, I was having to manage my own social media and make my own website and, do an acting resume. I started getting gigs and got representation in St. Louis, and then did a bunch of short films and some regional commercials and stuff, just building my resume. And after about a year, I switched over to classes in Chicago, and would take the train over there for about 4 hours and, do work on my computer on the train and then spend the night at a girlfriend's house and then come back the next day.
Wow.
Um,
I wanted to ask, so going back to when you moved to St. Louis and you decided to take acting classes, you started to really work at yourself. And I guess I wonder at what point, after all of this sort of discovery work that you're doing, at what point did you realize that being an entrepreneur was going to be your pathway? Like, at what moment did things start to take shape when you said, aha, this is going to be my, sort of my new career, if you will, where things started to start to make sense? I wonder, at what point did things become more clear in terms of what your career was going to look like?
I wouldn't really say that it was like one point. I think it was like you know, a couple of data collection points, like realizing um, that acting was entrepreneurship was probably one of them.
Mm,
And then kind of deciding that I didn't want to go back to a full-time job working for somebody else. Like I liked having the flexibility of being there for my son and, being able to stay home when he was sick or like pick him up early or, go to special events or whatever.
mm,
And then after I got into acting and I actually enjoyed it, um, it was like, okay, how do I maintain the flexibility to be able to go and shoot or to travel to St. Louis for auditions or go to Chicago for auditions? And, beyond already having the part time job as a program coordinator, what can I do to enable that flexibility and autonomy?
mm,
And starting your own business and working for yourself seemed to be the best way to do that.
mm.
Plus, I was already doing a lot of that marketing for myself anyway. So I was like, well, I know all these people who need it. Like, I might as well do it for them too and get paid,
Mm.
you know?
So when did you come up with the idea of your current company, Bon Strategic?
By the time that we moved back to Louisiana, I was still working on Say What Marketing, which was my digital marketing agency.
Mm,
And I was kind of banging my head against the wall with that for about a year and a half before I sucked it up and got a business coach. Um, and working with my business coach, Bianca Shinyak, she's great. She kind of helped me realize that, I was not happy with digital marketing. It wasn't complex enough for me as like a career. Um, there wasn't enough problem solving. It wasn't as purposeful and like meaningful as I needed to feel accomplished and satisfied. So, we did a lot of personality testing like Colby and wealth dynamics and, Myers Briggs and all these things. And in reviewing like my natural strengths and like personal inclinations and like how I think about stuff, and also looking at my previous career in science, like I had kind of just like, okay, I'm not doing science anymore, like none of that matters. But I actually had a lot of transferable skills from working in science
mm,
and, like the ability to think about things strategically and to see all the pieces and bring them together into something coherent. Like businesses use SOPs and have processes too. So it was kind of like she kind of considered things that I had not considered. And putting it all together, she was like, "You're an integrator." And I was like, "I don't know what that is." So then, going and reading up about the visionary integrator dynamic and EOS and just business in general, and reading those descriptions of an integrator, I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that is what I do. Like, that's what I did in science, and that's what I was trying to do in marketing. And it wasn't that far off for me.
mm,
So I started getting clients as I think at the time I called it an online business manager, um, and really just helping people figure their shit out and implement over time. I was a doer. And it kind of just grew organically into where I'm at now. Like the more clients that I worked with, they don't just need another person to delegate shit to. They need someone who can think, who can help them put out fires, someone they trust to give like whole aspects of their business and be like, here, I cannot deal with this shit anymore. Now it's
Mm,
yours. I came up with a name ideating with my business coach um, because, I'm in Louisiana. We were looking at all of these kind of like regional turns of phrase, and um, it kind of ended up like I was throwing ideas out there, but some of them are things that only people who live here would know how to spell. Like lanyap. You say that to somebody in Michigan, they're not going to know A, what the fuck is lanyap, or how to spell it. So it's like, what is something similar that people would know how to spell? And she came up with bonbon, and then we wanted to have something in the name that was like indicative of what I actually do. So here we are with bonbon strategic, and it's catchy. People like it, and it gives me fun branding ideas. So
hmm.
it's really worked out.
Love it. I have to say, when I reflect back to a couple of moments, one being where you decided to hone in beyond biology, and you started this career working, doing this, had this project, the Deepwater project. Um, you had to pivot, 2 year stay at home mom. Like, I feel like all of this was like a culmination of a moment when you decided to hire this coach, and this coach was absolutely transformational. Like, she was able to take a messy puzzle, a puzzle that was all disorganized, and put pieces one by one together. And it really helped you establish some clarity around, what your, purpose was going to be at that point in your career. And, I think today so many people um, disregard the idea of getting a life coach, a business coach, or someone who can help you sort through a lot of messy stuff. And I just love how you found someone who you could be vulnerable with, you could trust. You sort of like, I love in your title, by the way, you're a no BS fractional COO. And that definitely, comes to life here in our conversation here today. But you were no BS with her. You basically put everything on the table, your life, who you are, and you're like, hey, help me figure my shit out. And you were open. And that's like the best client to have. And it's almost like those are the clients that you want, where you almost you almost took the advice and even learned from your business coach, where your clients, your best clients, are probably the ones that are like, okay, my shit's totally screwed up. I need someone to come in here and help me fix it. And then you're like, okay, I can help you. And I feel like that coach was perfect for you. And that's
Yeah, she was
fantastic.
great. I love Bianca. It's kind of like being depressed, like when you're depressed, you can't see anything but your depression, and
Mm,
everything is clouded by your depression. And when you're in a point in your career or your life where you don't know what the fuck you're doing and you don't know where to go next, it's really hard to see what your options are or to consider them fully. So
mm,
it really helps, I think, to bring in a third party, lay it all out for them. But yes, you have to be vulnerable because if they don't understand the full situation, then it's hard for them to help you. Um, but it's just like me coming into somebody's business. It's a lot easier for me to see what's wrong and how to fix it because I can be objective. I'm not tied to their feelings.
mm,
Whereas if I'm looking at my own life and I'm unhappy and I'm trying to figure out where to go next, there are so many emotional ties and like mental blocks, that are associated with past events in your life or your previous career or like what other people's expectations are for you. Like there's so much shit clouding your judgment that it's really hard for you to make clear, positive decisions in the right direction. it's much easier for someone else who doesn't have all that shit clouding their judgment to see what your real options are and give you advice. So yeah, I 100% recommend, if somebody's stuck, like, work with somebody who's not involved in your life already, like someone who can come in and be objective and bring a new perspective and fresh eyes to your problem. Because sitting in it longer by yourself, you're probably not going to get where you want to go, at least not quickly.
I love that. So this conversation is so relatable for me because I had, just a different journey early on that impacted my identity and, sort of, created some challenges, especially in my 20s. And just hearing your story about your identity crisis, as you described it, I went through a very similar sort of thing. But when I reflect back, it's like all of the events that occurred in your life and impacted you, it makes you who you are today. And I think it makes the work even so much more fulfilling, when you're looking at your son and you're looking at the journey that you had to take to get here. Yeah, it's just so inspiring to realize that the tough times lead to good times. And yeah. Any other thoughts about that?
Well, as you were saying that, my thought that I tell myself is the only way out is through. Like, you have to keep going. And even if you don't know where you're going, sometimes it helps to just take the first step, you don't need to climb the whole staircase. You just need to do something different, do something you wouldn't normally do. Like, any step in a direction is better than standing still, because you'll learn something, like, even if it doesn't work out, you win or you learn. You never lose if you don't stop trying.
I love that. So, Kate, how can people find you?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's my main social media, I would say. Um, I'm also on Instagram, but it's more of my personal account.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Well, I'll share all your information here, your website, your LinkedIn profile for people to reach out and connect with you.
Okay, great.
I just loved our conversation. I feel like we're, both from New Orleans, kindred spirits. I completely relate to your story. It's super inspiring. And I'm really glad that Tara connected us. I think that
Yeah, me too.
this was just wonderful, and just really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing, the real side of your story. I think a lot of people appreciate that, and just really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and for, asking real questions and
Mm.
allowing me to kind of, I don't know, elaborate on these complexities of life that we all go through in one way or another.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Hello, Raymond again here. Thank you again to our sponsors, Career Minds, a global provider of outplacement and career development services. If you'd like to connect with me about your own personal journey, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, as well as find me on Instagram at raymondlee.co. Until next time, remember, if you're stuck or unsure of your career or future and you think it's time for a change, ask yourself these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that matter to me most? And am I creating value for myself and for others? Until next time.